Welcome again. I just wanted to just take a few moments now just to talk a little bit about the significance of Christmas in a different way, because we're continuing, or should I say concluding, our series today that we've been looking at over the last few weeks called A Time for Christmas. And in this series, what we've been doing is looking at some of the great things that we like about Christmas, the things that we like and value and even seek at Christmas time. Like we started off by looking at the fact that one of the things that people love and need at Christmas time is a Christmas miracle. Some people you may even come today needing a Christmas miracle. But what we recognise is saying a lot of the things that we like and need at Christmas time all started with the first Christmas. And so if you've come here today needing a Christmas miracle, the good news is that you've come to a season, you've come to a place where we celebrate Christmas starting because of a series of miracles. Lots of other people, we like Christmas because we like celebrating Christmas carols, and we like actually Christmas holidays. Like, who's looking forward to a Christmas holiday? I mean, seriously, a lot of us. But what many of us don't realise is saying Christmas carols and Christmas holidays actually started in the first Christmas, which is something that we may not know about and may not recognise. But also one of the great things about Christmas that many of us like, particularly those who like to get Lego, Iron Man Lego and all that stuff, we love Christmas presents, don't we? We love Christmas and Christmas presents. It almost becomes so much that it becomes all about the Christmas presents. Sometimes, though, that we may have let the Christmas present thing get maybe a little bit out of control. And so much so that we know that things can turn a little bit pear-shaped, go a little bit pear-shaped when things don't go as we may have hoped. I want to show you a clip now from American Late Night Show host, a guy called Jimmy Kimmel. Many of you might know who that is. He recently did a segment on his program, and it'll be interesting to watch how Christmas presents can go sometimes. Let's watch this now. Thanks, David.
Last week, I issued a challenge. I asked the parents of America to pull a little holiday trick on their children. We did this on Halloween with candy and got a lot of response to it. So we did it again, this time for Christmas. I asked parents to tell their kids they were going to let them open one present a few weeks early. But instead of a good present, I said, put something the kids won't like in the box and then upload a video of that to YouTube labeled, "Hey Jimmy Kimmel, I gave my kids a terrible present." And a lot of people did do this, and they did give their kids terrible presents, and a lot of the kids, surprisingly, reacted poorly to that.
What'd you, Charlie?
I don't like this.
Oh. What is it?
An old banana.
An old banana? Isn't that exciting?
No.
What are you doing?
Looking at.
Oh, okay.
What is that?
I got a girl activity book with stickers. I'm not a girl. I'm not a boy. I'm not a boy either. It's the worst present ever. What is this?
Marissa, what do you tell me all the time about my cooking?
I love it.
You love my cooking, so I made you something.
You should appreciate her getting us a present, but I didn't know it would be like that. Yes, a sandwich of mine. I love your cooking when you cook like dinners, like hot pockets or pasta or buffalo wings, something like that. Not just a sandwich. Why would you eat off of it?
Well, Marissa, so you don't want that peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
I'll eat it. I'll eat it.
Open it up. You didn't want that for Christmas?
You stinking parents! Take this back.
Take it back where? This is yours.
I want a refund.
It's a half-eaten sandwich. Isn't that what you asked for?
No, I asked for a toy.
What is it?
Really, taco seasoning.
Yeah, don't you like tacos?
I'm only 6, I can't make it.
Yeah, you can.
Ugh.
great-grandpa's hammer.
I got ponies!
That's nice. What's wrong? You're not excited about your presents?
Ponies. I don't want ponies. They're for girls.
Guys,
Mine is a stupid book.
we thought really hard about what to get you this year.
Well, you didn't do a very good job. It's the worst Christmas I ever had.
Worst Christmas I have ever had, that the little boy said at the end. That the 6-year-old girl with the taco seasoning, that's my favourite, without a shadow of a doubt. I'm only 6, I can't make it. So I just love that. Now, as much as that is a little bit of fun, and I'm sure that for the most part, those children will not be emotionally scarred for life as a result of their parents playing a trick on them. But it causes a question, or makes you think, as parents, you wouldn't deliberately want to give your children bad presents, would you? You wouldn't want to give them something that they don't want or would hate. You'd want to actually give them good things, wouldn't you? So that actually leads us into a question. When it comes to God, do you think that God is like one of those cruel parents on the clip there? Or do you think that he is somebody else? Do you think that he actually is someone else in his attitude? Interesting that during his ministry, Jesus said these words when it came to talk about God's gifts to us. Jesus said these words. He says, "You parents, if your children ask you for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead? Or if they ask for a fish, do you give them a snake? Of course not. So if you simple people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those who asks him?" You know what? Jesus is affirming here the reality that even though that as parents we might make mistakes and even some of our gift choices for our kids sometime, like perhaps, jerseys or something like that, if you prefer a different team or things like that to the South Sydney Rabbitohs. But, ultimately we know that even though we make mistakes, we as parents, we want to give good things to our kids. We want to bless them with stuff that will be meaningful and great for them, to bless them. So if Jesus says, if you as parents know how to do that, how much more will your Father in heaven, who loves you so much more than that, will give you good gifts? How much more will he give you good gifts? If we're honest, usually the present that we get from God, that being Jesus being the person that we celebrate most, the God's gift to us at Christmas time. Often the present that is Jesus gets overshadowed by the presents that we give or the presents that we receive. But in the original Christmas story, though, there was no giving of presents as to one another as we know it today. The giving of presents to each other was actually something that started over 1,000 years after the first Christmas. But there was still giving of presents in the original story nonetheless. Just a reminder again about what Lorraine read to us a little bit earlier. This is how the story goes. It says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who had been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and we have come to worship him." King Herod sent them to Bethlehem, and the star that they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. And they opened their treasures and presented to him with gifts, with presents of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Now, many of us here today are familiar with the Christmas story, particularly this part of the Christmas story. We might even have in our front garden, we might have that sort of like some silhouettes of the wise men and things like bringing gifts. We know the story very well, but even if this is the 1,000th time that you've heard the Christmas story with the wise men from the east, there may be something that you don't realise about this story. If you're a regular part of our church family, you know that a few weeks ago that we had a look through the Old Testament book of the Bible, the book of Daniel. Now, even if you're not a God person here today, you may still have heard about the guys, the Shadrach, Meshach, and the guy from Victoria, Abednego, and and about the fiery furnace. And then, or you might have heard about Daniel and the lion's den. That's all contained within that great book of the Old Testament called Daniel. But interestingly, the king that put Daniel into the lion's den was the ruler of the Mede Empire, and his name was Darius. And the Mede Empire was primarily based in what we now to be the modern-day Iran. So that's where the area that the Mede Empire was based. But because of a series of events, King Darius ended up putting Daniel in the lion's den. But then when he came back the next day, he discovered that Daniel was spared. He was unharmed, and he came out of the lion's den miraculously. And Darius's response to that was saying, everybody in my whole entire kingdom, in the whole empire, I'm issuing a decree to you that now, because of what God, the God of Daniel has done, I want you to fear and revere the God of Israel, Daniel's God, as a result of Daniel coming out unscathed. And so that went out to all parts of the empire. But the people who were impacted most about that decree were the religious leaders of the time, of that empire. And those religious leaders weren't just people, who were pastors or whatever like that. These people were basically controlled all of the activity of the empire because they were based around a very religious or a very spiritual operation in society. Now, these religious leaders, these spiritual people that organised and had so much influence over the Medo Empire were called what? Magi. They were called Magi. And so when we come to the Christmas story and we hear this term Magi for the very first time, we might think that that is something that is brand new, but not so. Actually, Magi had been around for hundreds of years, been hundreds of years before the time of what we read about in the Christmas story. So what this means then is that the Magi who had no choice at one point but to accept this royal edict from King Darius that they now had to tolerate, they now had to accept Daniel's God, the God of Israel, where they had to tolerate that at one point, a couple of centuries later, the same religious group, this Magi, would then come seeking the God of Israel, come seeking him to worship him. So what that means is that it all started with the faith of one Jewish guy in a foreign land, ultimately led to one of the most critical inclusions in the Christmas story. Because the Magi are critically important to the Christmas story because it says to the whole world that God has an interest in all people, not just the nation of Israel. So much so that it's including people that he'd been working in hundreds of years before to come and celebrate Christmas. The Magi are so very important. And it says, though, that God has been working towards the Christmas story even hundreds of years before it actually happened. That is something that will give us incredible encouragement, knowing that this is all part of God's plan. But let's get back to the Christmas story that Lorraine read to us a little bit earlier on. So what we read here is the origin of giving presents at Jesus' time. But notice that these travellers from the east, these Magi, they gave presents to Jesus. They didn't give presents to Mary and Joseph. They didn't have some for the kids and then some for the parents. And Mary and Joseph, they didn't have some emergency presents that were stuck under the tree just in case some unexpected guests came around. I mean, who has some unexpected guest presents under your tree right now, just in case someone turns up and you want to make sure you give them a gift? Anybody do that? We all usually have a box of Lindt or chocolate or something like that, just in case somebody turns up that we weren't expecting. Mary and Joseph weren't expecting these three guys to turn up, and so they didn't have presents for them. And so what we realise is that the presents by these wise men were only brought for Jesus. These presents were for Jesus. Now, the presents that were bought were a little bit weird. Let's be honest. Like gold, okay, we can get onto gold, particularly with, the way that the per ounce at the moment, we think is pretty valuable. That's pretty cool. Around, about $1,700 an ounce or something like that. It's pretty expensive. But gold was given as a sign of acknowledging Jesus' royalty. The gold is a gift associated with royalty. And what we know from what we heard earlier on, read to us, Jesus comes from a royal line. One of Jesus' distant ancestors was none other than Israel's greatest king, King David. And Jesus is part of that royal lineage. And so the gift of gold is understandable. But then you come to the gift of frankincense and go, frankincense? What? I don't know anything about frankincense. Frankincense is quite a weird substance, and we might not know about it, but what we do know about in our culture is that we might know about fragrance burners. If you go into dusk, everyone know the candle shop dusk, if you go into dusk, there's usually a wall of fragrance burners of some sort, and it's all about making your house smell really nice. Now, thanks to my wife, who happens to go to the Middle East quite regularly, or she did up until COVID time, she happens to pick up some frankincense. Frankincense, this is what it looks like. It's actually an aromatic resin, which when burnt, actually creates an incredible aroma. And if you'd like to, afterwards, just come up and have a smell of frankincense. It's incredibly powerful, but it's beautiful as well. But when you burn this the frankincense, it gives us this incredible aroma, and the aroma of frankincense is actually something that ancient people ascribed to something that was divine. It was an aroma that was associated with a deity, with God itself. So the gold was to acknowledge Jesus' royal line. Frankincense was to acknowledge Jesus' divinity. But then you come to myrrh. And this is what myrrh looks like in its solid form. And again, it has a very different aroma. This is really sweet. And please come up and have a smell of it later on if you'd like. And what myrrh is it's usually in liquid form, and it's used as an oil to embalm somebody who actually had died. Now, you might be thinking, that's quite an odd thing to bring a newborn. Some myrrh. Gold, yeah, okay, maybe for a trust fund for sometime a little bit later. Maybe some frankincense to make the room smell nice, particularly in a barn with all those farting animals. You know, it might make the whole thing smell a whole lot nicer. But myrrh, that's really quite weird. Well, the reason why they gave myrrh is because it's actually a pointer to what Jesus would go through at Easter time with his death. Now, I would imagine, though, that if Jesus received those presents like some of those kids did just before Christmas, and there's a video phones around there, I wonder if Jesus would react just like some of those kids go when they open the presents. What are these presents? Like, what on earth is frankincense for? What on earth is myrrh for? I don't want this. I wanted a Game Boy or something like that. I wanted a Souths jersey. Isn't that right, Luke? You wanted a Souths jersey. I got myrrh. Are you kidding? When he opened these presents, I'm sure he got a shock. But when it comes to your family, when you think about Christmas time, how does your family open Christmas presents? You know, one of the biggest shocks that I had in my early stages of my marriage to Edwina was understanding the big differences between the way that we used to open presents. Now, as usually is the case, your tradition of your family is the right and the best tradition, isn't it? It's always the right way. No matter what anyone else does, you do it the right way. Well, I come from a family, isn't this right, Mum? I come from a family that when it came to opening Christmas presents, this is how we did it. We'd sit in a circle, and then all the presents from under the tree or out of shopping baskets or pillowcases or whatever, that would be distributed to everybody sitting in the circle. And then when the very last present was given out, it was like a starter pistol was fired, and then it was Christmas mayhem. That's right. That's right, Penny. All the paper was going everywhere, and there was all these thank yous going in all directions and everything like that. But it was all over in about 5 minutes. And then after that, such an intense burst of activity, we needed replenishment. So then it was into the Christmas food. But because it was so depleted from all that activity of ripping presents and all that sort of stuff, that we needed the food from there. Now, not so with Edwina's family. Oh, my goodness. When I first came to, I was shocked when the way that they did it. Now, there are some similarities between the two families. Their family would also sit in a nice circle. They too would wait for and see the presents get distributed all very calmly. But then when the last present was given out, you had to sit and watch every person open every present. Now, the first Christmas that I went to, I'm going, oh my goodness, this is going to take forever. You know, this is the real reason why I have grey hair. I waited so long for the presents to get open, my hair turned grey. That's how long we had to wait with that. But it took forever. They'd usually start with the oldest person in the circle, and then you watch the oldest person unwrap all of their presents. Then the second oldest, then the third, and so on. You had to wait and watch every person open every present. And usually the person who was youngest, they got the raw end of the deal because they had to wait till the end. Now, they got a little bit crazy in a couple of years, and they started with the youngest and went to the oldest. But that's the craziness when it comes to Edwina's family. But that's what they did. That's what they did. Now, okay, truth be told, who's on Team Troy here where it's a willy-nilly free-for-all when it comes to presents? Who believes that's the right way of doing presents? Yes, a couple of people. Solidarity Brothers, there we go. But who's on Team Edwina where you've got to wait? Okay. I feel even the silent minority over here is validating that one as well. truth be told, and Mum, put your finger in your ears about this one, I actually prefer the way that Edwina's family do the presents. And so that's not going to be a slight upon our family tradition, Mum. So, but I really like the way they do it, because you don't merely get to see what you get, but actually you can able to see what has been given. You get to be able to see what each person has received and how important each gift is to that particular person. See, there's no stones or snakes or taco seasoning in any of the presents given by Edwina's family, and neither, truth be told, there was none of that in our presents either, was there, Mum? But by slowing down and having your focus on others, you get to appreciate what has been given, not simply making it all about what you have got yourself. But in a question that may be way too deep for us right now to think about, with all that's going on in this moment and all the cooking that needs to happen still and the preparation for people coming over to your place today, you know, maybe this is a question to store away for maybe Boxing Day tomorrow, before the first ball is bowled at the G or the boats head out of the heads. Maybe I want to think about this question. When it comes to God, do you only see what you get, or do you see what has been given? Those two things can be very different depending on which way you look at it. And your perspective on this could change everything. You know, in all the activity of Christmas and the focus that we can have, how much do we slow and actually focus on what has actually been given? And perhaps the most famous words in all of Scripture that most of us here will probably know are these words here. Jesus says this, he says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." Now, in this familiar verse here, do you think it's more of an Easter passage or a Christmas passage? See, for me, I think it's a passage that goes through all time zones. It's good for every day. But the thing is that this passage was fulfilled at Christmas, because Christmas is a time where God gave for us Jesus. So how much do you allow yourself to appreciate what has been given to you and to the world from God, in keeping with his great love for you as the perfect Father that he is? He doesn't give you a stone or a snake or taco seasoning. He gave you the very best present ever. He gave you Jesus, the present that we need most, the present that we actually want most. But that's a little bit weird, isn't it? That it was Jesus who was born on Christmas, but Jesus is our present. That's very different to the way that things usually happen, isn't it? I mean, when you usually bring presents to the birthday person, don't you? I mean, have you ever gone to a birthday party and empty-handed and come away with a present? That doesn't happen. Unless you stole the birthday person's present, you don't come away with a present. That's not usually how it works. You bring the presents to the birthday person. So if that's the case then, and if today we're celebrating Jesus' birthday, what present are you bringing Jesus? Well, for some of us, we might kind of come up empty because we can't get ready access to some frankincense and some myrrh. Some of us may have some gold stashed away somewhere, but we mightn't get access to this sort of stuff. So what are we to do? Maybe we aren't supposed to bring a present to Jesus. Or maybe what we think, we do a little bit of a present substitute. Because Jesus is not around with us as he once was, then what I'm supposed to do is say, the present I'm supposed to give Jesus, I'm going to give to somebody else. Now, I'm not quite sure how Jesus will feel about that when he knows that Jesus knows that I gave to my nephew the G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip. Like, that's not supposed to happen. Present substitute is not what's supposed to go on. It's Jesus' birthday. And make no mistake about it, we are to bring Jesus a present. But what present are we to bring Jesus on Christmas? Well, perhaps it is the intent of that little drummer boy that we sing about at Christmas time. What present did the drummer boy bring? He bought his very best for him and the rumpa pum pum. I bring my best for him. So maybe the present that you bring Jesus today is the best of what you have. You may not have much, but you bring what you have. You bring the best of what you have. And let that be the present to Jesus. But the reality is, though, that we celebrate a whole lot more than simply this day, than simply about being Jesus' birthday. We're celebrating so much bigger. And if you've been with us through the course of our Time for Christmas series, that when we have a look at how Jesus was conceived, you may remember me saying this, that Jesus is not merely the result of a miracle. Jesus is the miracle. My daughter Taylor over here, sorry to focus on you, is that she is our miracle child. Taylor is the result of an absolute miracle, considering how hard it was for Edwina and myself to conceive. She is our miracle. But Taylor is not simply the result. Taylor is the result of a miracle. But Jesus is not simply the result of a miracle. Jesus is the miracle. And as we progress deeper into the Christmas story, we come to this reality as well. That Jesus is not simply the reason for giving presents. Jesus is the present. Jesus himself is a present. You know, and as I have said before, and as we all know, that we get presents on our birthday. So if Jesus is the present, then Christmas in a way becomes our what? It becomes our birthday. It can become our birthday, the day when we can be born again. Born again in a spiritual sense that Jesus would talk about later in his life. We would be born again into new life, born into a new perspective, born into a new experience of God. Now, this is not some newfangled theology of the pastor here. This should not be new news to us, knowing that Christmas could very well be the day that we can be born again, because we just sang about it a little bit before. In Hark the Herald Angels Sing, it says, born to raise the sons of earth, born to what? Give them second birth. This is what we sing about. The reality is that Christmas is an opportunity for us to be born again, for us to place our faith in Jesus. But the reality is that so many people in this world don't put their faith in Jesus, and so they don't have an appreciation of the present that Jesus is for them. The way that we can have an understanding of Christmas is by accepting the fact that we have this present of Jesus. And Jesus, the present of Jesus, is having a full experience of God with us. How would your life be different if you knew that God was with you? That is the present that Jesus is to us, God with us. But the only way for us to understand that is by us accepting this present for ourselves. So in the frenzy of presents this year, can I encourage you to look beyond what you have get and instead look more intently at what has been given. We can focus so much on what we get from others, but we fail to see what we've been given by God. But if you look at what has actually been given to you by God, it could very well be the best Christmas ever. You know, on our Christmas tree hangs this decoration, and you might not be able to see it, but it's a picture of a devastatingly handsome man. And if you can't see that, that's a picture of my father. And this year is the 14th year when my dad's not going to be at our Christmas table. And but we would hang this on the tree to always remind us that Christmas, we always remember those who are no longer with us. And maybe this year you might have something similar, or you may also remember somebody who's not at your Christmas table this year. Maybe for some of us, this is the very first Christmas where we don't have someone special at our Christmas table, and we know that Christmas can be incredibly hard for us, particularly as we think about those who are absent. But here's the thing, that in reality, we can't celebrate Christmas also without thinking about death. So we can't think about the real meaning of Christmas with Jesus without remembering what happened at Easter with Jesus. The present that is Jesus will only be fully appreciated with our understanding that he came into the world to die at Easter for the forgiveness of our sins, sins of all people, even the sins of our parents when we prank our kids with not presents that they actually want. Jesus even forgave us of those sins as well, and so many others, all others. And so Jesus is the present, and we are not simply to remember this gift as a baby, but rather we are to remember this gift as the crucified Saviour.